Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Hamid Karzai has been declared the new president of Afghanistan after the runoff which was supposed to take place couldn't because there was only one candidate left after the other contender, Abdullah Abdullah, withdrew. To discuss the implications of the elections and the assumption of office of Hamid Karzai, we have with us Seema Mustafa, veteran journalist and editor of Covert magazine. Seema, the election process with all its ups and downs has finally ended. Afghanistan has a president. With what authority do you think Hamid Karzai now assumes office?
With probably less than he had before, and which is really saying something, because they could have just carried it through instead of going through this very expensive and highly controversial election, which probably has damaged the credibility of the people involved far more than not having it would have.
The credibility of the so-called election process has been called into question.
Absolutely.
The credibility of the newly elected president has been called into question, and the credibility of the international coalition which engineered or called for these elections has also been called into question. So what has ultimately been achieved by this entire process?
You know, I think this is nothing. And I think this is really where the Americans and all these people who are in this whole international coalition have to sit back and really try to understand, because we knew that militarily they haven't understood. And now it seems that politically also they're completely out of their depth in trying to engineer local politics, in trying to give it a shape and direction which they think is to do with democracy, which is totally alien. And I'm not talking of democracy in the Western sense.
But this kind of electoral...
this kind of a thing is totally alien to the people of Afghanistan. And I think that most of them must be laughing or might be miserable about what they have had to undergo and what they have gone through. And at the end of it, you have Karzai sitting again in Kabul, master of nothing else but a few streets in Kabul, and probably the areas around which he lives, and that's it.
All said and done, what the election process also showed was that Karzai had managed to stitch together a coalition of interests from different regions, representing different ethnic groups, which is the way coalitions and power is built traditionally in Afghanistan anyway. Now, that is the foundation on which he is going to build. But given his weakened credibility and position, how do you think he is going to respond, or the coalition he represents is going to respond? And what impact do you think that's going to have on the insurgency and the ongoing civil war in that country?
You know, even if he had come in a free and fair election, he would have had a very difficult time in trying to keep this coalition that he has stitched together and responsive, because he is holding hands with people we know all about. They've been around forever, Dostum, Fahim, certain warlords in that area, all of them who are holding his hand at the moment, because they are going to strengthen their positions, and they're going to maybe, I don't want to use the word criminalize, but they are going to do a lot more to expand their base than he's going to be able to do.
Sure.
Right? And I think what is really interesting is that after so many years in Bush's Great War on Terror, they are left with nobody. They haven't been able to bring up another leadership. They haven't been able to find new persons. They haven't been able to bring in other people into the fold, as it were, because after all, the Americans claim that they're fighting this war for everybody in Afghanistan and for the people of Afghanistan. They're still left with the same discredited warlords and with the same kind of people who have been seen by the Afghans as puppets of America.
And no new institutional structure either.
None.
To pass for democracy as against the earlier setup in Afghanistan. But how do you see this situation now unfolding with regard to the Taliban or the insurgency? How is that going to be impacted now?
You see, now it seems that because he's coming back weaker, Karzai, and his relationship with Washington is not going to be as cozy as it was earlier, and he knows that. He will have a little bit more nuisance value in the sense that the little bit that they could do through him, they're going to find it more difficult. He's not going to be a willing voice. Not that he's going to be able to deliver anything, but he's going to create spokes in the wheel. When they want to talk to Pakistan, he'll talk to India. When they want to talk to India, he'll talk to Pakistan, to put it very simplistically. Yeah. But at the same time, the Americans are, they're completely, from all that you read around them and all the papers that are coming out, they're completely bereft of a strategy. For once, they're very powerful think tanks which always have a worldview on everything, don't have a view on Afghanistan. There is nothing coming out from Washington which gives a clear-cut strategy. This whole thing of dividing the good and the bad Taliban has been denounced by one, if it's commended by one group, then it's denounced by another think tank. So they don't have a strategy. So really one doesn't really know how they're going to go, except they want to pound it militarily. That also Obama is not very keen to do. I mean, not to the extent that his generals have asked him. So it's very, very difficult for us even to sit here to say what the Americans can do except exit and get out.
The whole rationale of bringing in Hamid Karzai from day one till now, given that he had no great power base, is that he was a Pashtun and that he would provide some kind of leverage with which to bring in the Taliban, if you like, or sections of the Pashtun population.
The good Taliban.
The good Taliban, or at least the non-Taliban Pashtun sections. Till now, Hamid Karzai has not been able to make any headway. But in order to be a larger nuisance factor for the Americans, do you think he will now try to build up a base in the Pashtun hinterland?
I think he tried even before. I think there was never lack of evidence in him trying to reach out and try to, he used to travel a little out, meet people, go for various things. He was trying to expand his political base to make himself at that time maybe more relevant to the Americans than not. But he wasn't successful. Nobody buys him. He's seen as too much of a puppet by his own Pashtuns. Okay. So they might not be supporting the Taliban in the real sense of the political sense of the word, but they definitely are not with him. And I don't think he's going to be able to get them in this reincarnation.
Going back to the point of the strategy that you were talking about, the big debate in Washington and in the US these days is between a supposed counter-insurgency strategy vis-a-vis a counter-terrorism strategy, with the counter-insurgency strategy seeming to suggest that there should be some kind of a broad basing of the political dimensions of the US strategy. With Obama now, with the elections over, he can now once again turn his attention to what he is going to do with regard to the surge. How do you see this US strategy now unfolding? Do you think it will have some depth or it will still flounder?
I think it's floundering already. See, it is very clear. I mean, even if you talk to the military of India or Pakistan, just the military perspective, is that you cannot win this war militarily with the number of troops that you have there, the Americans, right? I mean, they can keep pounding away, killing. At the same time, you cannot win this war even if you double your troops. Now, militarily, their generals and their commanders had no choice but to ask for 40,000 more troops. I believe Obama has only agreed to 15,000. So militarily, neither side's going to be happy. You've sent in 15,000 more because you had to, under pressure from the establishment. At the same time, you have not taken it to the figure where they'll say, okay, we've got 40,000, now we can give you some results, which they won't anyway. And politically is the real thing, politically they're not being able to work it out. The level of terrorism within Pakistan now, which has become the playing field, the kind of attacks in Pakistan has made the strategic ally really weakened in that area. And they're not going to be able to depend on Pakistan's army and Pakistan as an intact state which is stable and strong to some levels to be able to wage this war in Afghanistan. Right. They're really bleeding. And this is the new strategy that Baitullah Masood's brother, sons, and various people have now put in. The younger generation has come in. And they've decided that, well, there is so much we can get in Afghanistan, so attack the strategic ally. And there's a blast every day. And the target is the army. And they're going right into the army's den, its headquarters. So it is a very, very scary proposition, I think, for the Americans now, because they cannot continue this war without the help and real help from Pakistan.
With the view that Hamid Karzai's election, after this flawed electoral process, certainly not being a step forward, and in fact quite likely to be several steps backward, we leave you with that thought. Thank you, Seema.